Okay, the whole situation, and nothing but the situation. I've got 2 tanks, which nobody knew about. Even the previous owner only knew about 1 tank. So I think this has been this way for over 10 years. Probably closer to 15 years like this. There's a tank here. It has a baffle. And then there was a tank here, another concrete tank. It has since collapsed. That's the outer top wall, I guess, the top cap. And that pipe has a baffle on it right underneath me with no clean out, no way to clean it. That goes into here, this, and it had a secondary baffle back here. That baffle went out, turn, went down to my field. When we took all this pipe apart, it had some black sludge in it, because basically what I'm thinking is at one point this tank collapsed, and whoever looked at it didn't know what they were looking at, and they decided, well, that must be an old tank that they never filled in. So then they filled it in with dirt. Had to have, because there was no real low spots around here. So they filled it in with dirt thinking it was a abandoned old tank, but in reality it was the second half of this tank. And it sat almost 8 inches lower than the first tank. So, I mean, if they had just looked in there, they'd have seen the baffle, the outlet was here and not on the side. So this was the direction that the water's being outlet. So basically the water was going through all the dirt and sand that they used to fill in, and then slowly seeping up the baffle, and then slowly coming out there. So it carried some solids with it out to the field. So that concerned me that the field was garbage. But then again, the field really hasn't been getting full flow for 15 years, I think. So what I did is I took a garden hose, and this is not it. This is a different garden hose. I took a garden hose, went right to the header, tees off and goes both ways, and I let that thing run all night, 15 plus hours, full garden hose. It was also raining all last night and this morning, and when I came out here this morning, it was still drinking it just fine. It wasn't full or nothing, and I must have put 8,000 gallons in this thing, and it's a decent sized field, but that should have filled it. There's a little bit of a wet spot down there, which is actually below the field, but that also is a wet spot whenever it rains real bad. It did rain, so I don't think that's the field. But what we got now is we got a sump pump, essentially, really cheap Harbor Freight sump pump, sitting on a couple of bricks, and that tube dumps into there, and this tank was just emptied. I had it drained the other night, or yesterday. So I've got a couple of days before that tank even gets filled up. So I think it's like a 1,000-gallon tank. So then once that fills up, every time you flush or something, just the water should come in here. But then I'm creating a secondary separation tank, essentially, because I got the sump pump elevated about halfway up in the tank. And then that will then pump the water. See, 2 different garden hoses. That'll pump the water into my field. It's gonna be like this way for about 2 weeks until I can get a tank. I believe I got a guy in mind, and I just got to rent the excavator, dig a hole. I think I'm just gonna put it right here next to it, because the field doesn't actually start till about here. So if I can dig a hole right here, or even right here, and put a tank there, right next to the old tanks basically, and then dig a trench from the house and over here, so that I can replace all that pipe too, because it's kind of messed up a little. So it'll have to go from the house down over into the tank, right there, and plumb it out to the field. It's gonna be about 2 weeks before I can get the new tank and equipment out here. I'm just got too many other projects, and I'll check on this thing, and this will suffice. I got a bigger ped mount tank, but I'd have to run some PVC over to it if I had to. So we'll let this run, and once that tank gets full, we'll see if that little thing can keep up or not. But basically, the whole field been this area for 15 years. And every now and again, the sump pump is right there in the basement. They say the sump pump smells a little stinky. So what I did is I put a little vent fan, plumbed it, put a cap on it, a sealed cap, and ran a vent out over to here, so it just sucks out the fumes. But I don't have a sense of smell, so I was kind of assuming that they as in my wife and children, were over exaggerating the smell of poop and just being groundwater smell. But in reality, I believe this has just basically just been seeping over to the foundation for the last decade and a half, using the sump pump in the house. So this is a little temp setup that we're gonna try for a couple of weeks. Give you an update when the tank goes in.